Hi everyone, it is October 5th and we are out in our old field, and Steve has been doing a tremendous amount of work this fall in our fence row, which is where I'm heading right now. So I was showing you kind of our seep sedge meadow zone, and then now you can see where he is working. It looks like devastation, doesn't it? Wow, so he's been planting a ton. But to plant, he's getting rid of the invasives. And so we're gonna go up here and see what he's doing. And I just wanted to give you a scope of this work by starting out a little bit further, because he is working so hard. So here we go. We're getting back into it. This is our last main area of really bad invasives. So we're gonna head in here. He's tough, huh? Okay, we're almost to him. All right, and here he is, the crazy worker.
Oh, hi there, everybody.
So, what are you doing?
I am working on removing invasive honeysuckle, which is, as most of you already know, one of the main invasives that we have in the Midwest. And you can see what happens with it is you end up with a big wall of honeysuckle. And between the fact that it leaves out before everything else, holds its leaves past everything else, and also supposedly exudes an allelopathic chemical that keeps other things from growing under it. It has a pretty huge impact on native flora. So we have removed most of it from our property, but we have this one corner that we're finishing up. It's probably the original population, so smart weed management says we should have done this one first, because then we would have got more of the seed source contained, but we didn't, so we're doing the best we can on getting it done now. And so it's pretty simple to do. You either can do you can either spray the leaves, or you can cut the shrubs and treat the stumps with a hand sprayer. We've sprayed leaves before, but it's a lot more exposure to the herbicide, which we don't like, and you also get off-target spraying, which could kill native plants and also, waste chemicals. So we basically, it's harder to do it from a cut stump perspective, but you don't use nearly as much herbicide. You don't aerosolize it so that you're not breathing it, and you don't need very many tools. Basically, you need a simple hand sprayer, some gloves, some loppers, and I usually have one of these flip saws, because you'd be surprised at how big of a stump you can cut with one of these. Even though I've broken the tip off just like 5 minutes ago, it still works. So with a minimum of tools and a minimum of exposure to herbicide, you can get the first round of this done, and then after that, all of the stuff that sprouts from seed you can pull in the spring when the soil's moist, and then you don't have to use any more herbicide, and eventually you end up getting all of the honeysuckle removed. Now, you still might have stuff coming in from neighboring lands through birds, but that's just the way it is. The reward, though, is when you get rid of the honeysuckle, you can either replant other things, or you can, one of the advantages of doing the honeysuckle removal carefully is you can find the native plants that are already existing on the site that are kind of in remission from the honeysuckle. Once you remove the honeysuckle, they can do better. And a short list of the stuff that we found just in this small area, which is only maybe like 1/10 of an acre, is gooseberry, greenbrier, grape, viburnum prunifolium, a native viburnum, eastern wahoo, American hackberry, black cherry, American elm, white ash, sweet cherry, native blackberry, native raspberries. There's probably others, but
So everybody, let
and-
me look at that list.
And also, greenbrier. Did I say greenbrier?
Yeah.
Dreamrider. So some of those things some people may or may not like. It depends on your habitat and what you're trying to do. But all those things for what we're trying to do and our habitat are great. So
Which is what are we trying to do?
this is just forest, eastern hardwood forest, deciduous forest with a native shrub layer and the ground floor that you would tend to get in absence of all these invasives. So
Well, and one thing you said is carefully removing, because what tends to happen frequently?
what tends to happen is people use large equipment, everything from chainsaws up to skid steers with a forestry cutter, and basically pulverize everything. And so it's quick, and it's definitely worth doing on a larger scale if you just can't get it done otherwise. But for a smaller scale especially, or if you have a lot of volunteers or labor, a more careful approach. The advantage is use less herbicide, you can engage more people in what you're doing, and also you can retain the native plants that are already here.
And if you had to guess, I know that we haven't done any research on this, but about the genetics of those plants that have survived in here with honeysuckle, what would you say about them, of those native plants?
Oh, I would say those things are probably way more hardy than anything you could bring in and plant, because they've survived in that environment, with that harsh competition for decades probably. So we think that we've released them. They are probably going to go, they're going to do quite well. But what we do with those is we flag those with tape or whatever you've got, so you don't lose track of them, because if you're deciduous leaves like we are, they're going to fall over the winter, and then you're going to come out here in the spring and the honeysuckle is going to resprout and you won't know what you've got. So it's good to, as you're working your way across, what we do is mark the natives that we find so that in the spring we don't accidentally pull them or lose track of them amidst a flush of honeysuckle sprouting from seed.
Well, and because some of those are fairly similar to honeysuckle, right? They have the opposite pairing of leaves.
Yeah, viburnums in particular look a lot like honeysuckle. In fact, I almost killed a few here just because I usually work I usually work fast, but I try to be methodical so that I don't miss things. But it's also good to be cognizant of what you're doing so you don't inadvertently kill things that you don't want to kill. Because the end game here is trying to restore native plants, and if you already have native plants here, that's way better than trying to plant native plants and water them and get them to thrive when you maybe already have some. And so we definitely do a lot of planting too, but retaining what's there is obviously a lot easier and free.
Well, for sure. And so I know we're going to get a couple questions about chemicals, because people know in general that we're not using a lot of chemicals around our land, except for this one case in treating invasives. So why do we do that?
We do that because if you don't, when you're cutting invasive plants and woody plants in particular, shrubs, whether it's honeysuckle or autumn olive or multiple rose, if you don't treat the stumps, they're just going to resprout. And so you can cut them repeatedly, and some people say doing that uses up whatever energy stores they have and they die, but I've never experienced that. So to me, it's worth using a little bit of herbicide in the short term to fast track what you're trying to do. If you're obviously, you need to be careful if you do embark on using herbicide. I would recommend maybe volunteering with a group that does this kind of work before you do it, so you learn how to do it properly. And there's tons of videos on YouTube, and there's a lot of research. But the thing about herbicide is, the old saying is, the label is the law. The label on the herbicide is federal law, so you can't just go kind of grab a bottle of herbicide and use it without knowing what you're doing.
And so you're not just grabbing a bottle of herbicide and using it straight, right? It's diluted.
No, I've diluted it, so
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into that because I'm not advising people on how to do herbicide. I've got a pesticide applicator's license, so I know what I'm doing, give or take. But if you don't know what you're doing, proceed with caution.
All right, very good. So we're getting those big ones, honeysuckle, autumn olive. What are you showing here?
Piles.
Yes, so we have these massive piles, which Steve's going to talk about here in just a moment. So we got honeysuckle, autumn olive, we pull garlic mustard. What's the other one? Any other major?
Multiple rows.
Oh yeah, and multiple rows. So those are the main invasives that we do here on this land. There are some other non-natives that we don't manage that people ask us about routinely, but if they are not a problem and they are beneficial, we don't worry about them. So we plant native all the time, but if there are some non-natives that are hosting other, like Queen Anne's lace, we're not going to battle with Queen Anne's lace because we're not prairie here, right?
Right.
So.
Plus, we only have so much time. But I just wanted her to show you this pile because you do end up with piles. What I try to do is chunk this stuff up with my loppers so it gets spread out a little bit and decomposes more quickly, but that takes a lot of time, so usually you end up with some piles, which is kind of a mess, and then honeysuckle will, or whatever you're battling, will sprout from within the pile, but that's just part of the deal. Within a few years, those things will decompose, and which is great because most of these sites need organic matter put back into the soil because when they cleared them, they didn't leave anything. So that over time helps the soil increase organic matter, and that helps the plants. But the other thing that we leave, if you pan up to the grapevine, we do leave grapevines. A lot of people don't like grapevines, mainly because they're misinformed, but grapevines are great because they're native. They host a lot of birds. We have catbirds that use our grapevines, and the thing with grapevines, and this is stuff we learned from forestry, just reading through foresters, and I forget what they call them, but you can manage your grapevine population so that you don't, you have maybe whatever 30% of your canopy is grapevines, or 20% or whatever, but the main thing is you don't have to kill them all. And so what we usually do is let them go on the trees that are being impacted by some kind of disease anyway, like American elm. This one's on American elm, and it may or may not live, so it's certainly not going to hurt it to have grapevine climbing up it, and then the grapevine gets to the top and can get a good canopy of leaves because it's at the top where the sunlight is. So we just basically manage for those so that the catbirds and other birds that use that eat grape,
and moths like the Pandora's Sphinx and
yeah,
several others.
Exactly, and all the things we don't know. So
right.
I guess just, it's easy to get too aggressive with removing plants that maybe historically people have thought were a problem, but you can always hit pause and do research and find out before you, especially if you're treating the stumps with a herbicide. It's not like you're going to get them back, but we have had to take out a few grape because just so we can walk, but they're going to resprout. We have a lot retained, plus there's a lot of fruit, so we're going to get resprouts, so we're not too concerned. Pretty soon this will be back. I mean, it looks pretty terrible right now, but after a couple of years it will look excellent again, and it'll be mainly native plants.
Well, and you guys, I just want to say that I want to show you the soil here in a moment, because Steve is a soil scientist. That's what he's studied for a really long time, and so he knows soils like no one else that I know. Seriously, as an environmental educator, when I would work to teach soils, I thought, geez, this stuff is kind of complicated and difficult. And I've learned so much just hanging out with Steve. And it's really interesting when you do look down at the earth here. It's just, there's not much here. So I'm going to just let Steve say something about this down here. Tell us a little bit about, maybe just very quickly, what's going on.
Okay, so the eastern part of the country was and is mainly forest, and in a forest ecosystem, the soil should have a thick layer of decomposed leaf litter and rotting logs and so forth. And as you can see here, there's really just a few leaves, and most of those are from this year. There's a lot of reasons why that is the case, but that's a whole nother day. But so we've lost a lot of that organic layer in our sites that used to be forests and even that are forests, and but however we can get it back by retain, if you're doing any clearing or selective logging or whatever, just leave the tops, leave your snags standing, leave a lot of material to decompose, because it's going to take a while to get the forest floor organic layer back. But I know we've been backpacking places in West Virginia that were logged, but for some reason they didn't lose the organic layer. We've dug down for various reasons and found, you know, feet literally of organic material before you hit the mineral soil, and which
Feet, that he said feet.
Pretty-
It's incredible.
It's pretty incredible. So if you have that, great, retain it. If you don't, start adding organic matter back now. Got to
Yes.
start sometime. So
Might as well be now.
if not now, when? If not who? If not now, when? If not you, who?
There you go, you got it. And a catbird serenading you in the background. So, okay, this is awesome. Any last thoughts?
Like I said, embark on your weed management, but proceed with caution and education.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Bye.